Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I think you all know the emergency evacuation procedures, so I don't need to do that. Health and safety wise, obviously, if you've tested tested positive for COVID, we shouldn't be here. I think that's about it. And we'll move on to the agenda. I've just done the emergency evacuation procedure. Apologies for absence. I've had apologies from Councillor Rain and Councillor Oxley and Councillor Cousins. Agenda item number 3 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of June 2002. And it's just to have the minutes noted as a correct record. I'm not sure. Councillor Wass was here, so it was just myself and Councillor Wass that were present. So do we just have that noted?
Yeah.
Yeah. Councillor Wass, are you happy to? Yeah.
Okay, Chair. Thank you.
Chair, I'm so sorry. I do apologise for interrupting. How many members have we got present? I can only see you this evening. Are we quorate?
Yeah, we've got 3 members present.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's
okay,
fine.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I'd be a bit worried if it was just me. Moving on to agenda item number 4, which is urgent business. I've not received notice of any urgent business, which should be dealt with under the meeting. Number 5, agenda item number 5 is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest? No members have any declarations of interest to announce. Agenda item number 6 is the Treasury Management Annual Report on pages 7 to 18. And Anton, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So, yeah, this is the annual report for the last financial year. And I'm aware of the size of the agenda, so I'll try and keep it brief, but happy to answer any questions that I can do. I'll pick up afterwards where I can't. The summary of this report is it's not particularly interesting, and I do joke about that because when Treasury management reports get interesting, it usually means there's something not right. I have to say that Treasury management reports will probably start to get a bit more interesting given the current economic climate that we're experiencing, the turbulence in the markets. So this is something that we do as part of the SIPFA code. We adhere to the code. We do use experts, Link Asset Services, to help us with the Treasury management. A few important points just to point out in terms of economy and interest rates. They're highlighted in 6.7. So it talks about interest rates over the last financial year. They remained relatively low, but they started to increase during the last financial year, i.e. up to the end of March this year. And as the report says, at March this year, they were 0.75. They're currently 2.25. They will go higher. How high, we're not quite sure yet. And when. The second point is that we're seeing higher inflation as well. And the figures in this report, again, they're out of date. Well, they're not out of date. They're factually right for last year. But during the end of last year, we were expecting inflation to exceed 8%, and it's now around about 10%. So inflation is another factor here. In terms of how we budget, because we have a fair bit of money that is invested. It's invested safely. There's some details as to how we do that. But we do make a return on it. The last couple of years, our return has been low because of low interest rates. That's starting to increase. And in fact, this report goes to P&R tomorrow as well as part of the process. And also to P&R tomorrow is the Q1 finance report. And on there, it's showing that this year already we've made about £200,000 extra in interest than expected. That's probably going to go higher. So that's one small advantage, I think, of the current issues and turbulence in the market. But of course, you have to balance that with the fact that because of high inflation and high interest rate, costs will go up. So there's a bit of balancing out. So it's not all good news, but that particular line, we will see that increase next year. So you can see in 6.19, we only budgeted for £55,000 of interest. We got 50,000, and that was all part of the accounts that we reported to you a few months ago. So I'm not sure I want to pick up anything else from the report. It's non-controversial. There's nothing particularly worrying about it. And the other economic market issues and impact on loads of other things as well. So I'll leave it there, but happy to pick up any questions.
Thank you, Anton. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Wass.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Anton. Yeah, I picked up on the fluctuating interest rates, and I saw that the base rate had gone up to 2.25, and like you mentioned there at the end, that you know, for all we might be making money on the success that it's shot up so high in relation to what it was, everything else is costing. And I know I asked you this a while back about what we needed to get through the vesting process, and you said about £1 million to sort of carry us through it. How would you perceive things are going to be because of the fluidity of the markets at the moment and the way things are going, and just keeping a handle on things? Do you think we'll still make that?
Yes, I do. Again, you'll see from if you have a look at the Q1 report, it'll go to PR tomorrow, but it'll also go on to full council in October. I think October. I'm not sure which one it's over, but it will go there as well. So you see that we are not using as much of our reserves as we thought we might do because of the slowdown in capital projects, and we're being a bit cautious about some of those. So we'll be okay. Yeah.
Any other questions? No, thank you, Anton. Thank you for the report. It's recommended that the council note the annual Treasury Management Report for 21-22 and approve the actual 21-22 prudential and Treasury indicators in this report. Yep, can we take that by general affirmation? So,
That's fine, Chair.
thank you. Moving on now to agenda item number 7, which is the internal audit and counter fraud progress report. And I'll hand over to Connor for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. So this is the first internal audit progress report for the year. It begins on page 21 of your packs and runs through to page 30. It's our first update on work programme delivery for 2022-23. And it also provides a bit of a forward look in terms of the priorities for the remainder of what will be a truncated year. Appendix A on page 24 is probably the key one in terms of understanding the work we've currently got ongoing. Since our last report to this committee in July, we've completed the audit of records management, where we arrived at a reasonable assurance opinion. You can read more about the key findings from that audit in Appendix C, which is on pages 28 and 29. We've completed to draft report stage the audit of Section 106 agreements and community infrastructure levy, and we're now just waiting on a response from management to our findings. We've also undertaken 2 central government grant claim certifications, so one of those related to the Contain Outbreak Management Fund and the other one related to the Test and Trace Support Payment Scheme, and we're able to verify appropriate use of both grants. We're also in the final stages of fieldwork for the Everyone Active and Cyber Awareness and Email Security audits. So members might recall that those two audits actually began in the 2021-22 audit year, and they've unfortunately taken us longer than we'd expected, but we do anticipate being able to conclude those next month. Appendix C also shows that we've made a start with, or at least have begun planning on a number of new audits. 4 of those are key financial systems audits that we'll be prioritising for the remainder of the financial year. If I just move on now to Appendix B, this pretty much reflects what I've just mentioned, in that much of our new work, I call it new work or do now priority work, relates to the Council's key financial systems. And the current forecast is that we'll be able to complete that work by the end of the calendar year. And that will mean all key financial systems audited by that point in time. A number of audits are listed in the do later category, as there are every year. At the moment, it's looking unlikely that we're going to undertake those audits, but we will continue to assess the risks in those areas in deciding our priorities for delivery for the remainder of the audit year. And just to confirm for completeness, really, no new audits have been added to the programme at this stage. Again, so Appendix C provides some high-level information on the key messages that we delivered following our review of the Council's record management arrangements. You can see that there are a number of actions that have been agreed to address the control weaknesses that were identified as part of that work. So to conclude then, really, in summarising the work, there aren't any specific issues we need to bring to the committee's attention as a result of the follow-up work that we undertake with officers across the council. We're working closely with the recently appointed corporate services manager and his staff to ensure that any outstanding follow-ups have sufficient visibility in the organisation. So that's sort of up to and including strategic management board level. Just to say, I'm happy to take any questions at this juncture, or otherwise to hand over to my colleague Jonathan Dosworth, who would take you through the counter fraud progress report.
I think, Connor, I'll just see if anybody's got any questions now, and that just makes it easier to break it up. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Wass.
Hi, Connor. Thanks for your report. On page 4, the Appendix A, I know everything's in progress. Do you know if there are any assurance levels of concern in there?
No, I mean, those that are perhaps closer to ending being, as I mentioned, cyber awareness and everyone active. I'm not clear at this stage as to whether or not we will be giving an assurance opinion for everyone active based on the nature of the work that we've undertaken. It was perhaps more of a consulting type engagement in the end. Certainly for cyber awareness and email security, I've had a recent catch up with the senior auditor leading on that work, and they said there's certainly no sort of big ticket items to come out of that work, which would suggest any significant weaknesses in that area, which we all know is key and significant risk across the organisations or organisations generally and the sector. So certainly the work that's sufficiently progressed, nothing major coming out of those. The others that are in progress are in earlier stages, so it would be a bit premature of me to say at this stage.
But according to what you were inferring, then you're not sure whether or not these will be complete by the end of the year?
Oh, no, they definitely will be. Definitely by the end of the audit year, the work that's in progress will certainly be. The Everyone Active and Cyber audits really ought to have been probably completed by the July committee, but they've just unfortunately taken a little bit longer. And timings have meant that we haven't quite managed to get them through to this committee. So perhaps in the next 2 to 3 weeks, I'd expect those to be finalised. Certainly everything listed in the list in Appendix A will be done by the end of the audit year.
Okay, great. I misunderstood that then, obviously. Thank you.
No problem.
Further questions? No further questions for you, Connor. Thanks for the report, and I'll hand over to Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening. The Counter Fraud Progress Report starts on page 31 of the pack, And I'd like to highlight some training that we're doing for staff ahead of LGR. We think LGR is there's potential fraud risk, and we're trying to make sure that staff are aware of anything that might occur. We also raised awareness of whistleblowing to staff, and we provided training to managers on how to handle concerns if they were raised. In terms of investigative work, following an investigation into COVID-19 grant fraud, the council prosecuted a man for falsely claiming a COVID-19 grant. He told the council that his business was active when in fact it had closed down some months before. He pleaded guilty at court in July, and the court took the offence very seriously. He was given a 20-week prison sentence. That was suspended for 18 months on condition that he perform 200 hours of community service. A summary of an investigative work is in Appendix A of the report. I think the only thing I'd note is that there's been an increase of reports of fraud to the team, but also an increase in the amount of savings produced as the result of our investigations. I think that's everything I want to say about the report, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jonathan. Are there any questions?
Yeah,
Councillor King.
how does Rydell marry up with other areas nationally with regards to the fraud?
I think I can only speak to the councils that we deal with in North Yorkshire and in the North East, but we have seen an increase in the reports of fraud. I think overall, there's not a lot of fraud within the Rydell area, but it does occur. It occurs at every local authority. And I'd say this is one of the only cases in terms of COVID-19 fraud that we found or taken to court for Rydell.
Councillor Wass.
Thank you. On page 34, you've got your report stating that the revenue that we made or the actual savings was £7,000, which resulted in 43% of the investigations were successful. I don't know whether that is a negative or a positive in terms of are we getting better or the reverse. I didn't quite understand that table.
I'll explain it. After an investigation, often there's a debt to be repaid to the council, and the amount of savings is the amount of money that has been brought back into the council as a result of that, as a result of the investigative work. The £7,000, if you compared it to last year, you can see that up to the 31st of August, we've recovered quite a large chunk in comparison to the previous year. In terms of the successful investigations, we've only completed 7 investigations, so I wouldn't read too much into that figure, but it's a figure that we've historically reported to the committee. I would say anything over 30 or 40% in terms of investigation is good, though for me and for the team, proving that a fraud has not occurred and that somebody is not guilty of an allegation isn't a lack of success.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor King.
Yeah, I'm going to be really rude here, as is the norm. Considering the money that's been recouped, is it value for money? And I appreciate you're going to say, yes, this needs to be policed, but is it value for money?
I think for the amount of investment that the council makes into counter-fraud services, the amount of money recovered does represent good value. The amount of money that we can calculate is only a proportion of the total loss to the council. Some of it is undetected. Some of the money is not going to be recovered for economic reasons. The main thing that all councils should do is to deter people from committing fraud against it. So if the council had no counter-fraud function, they didn't investigate fraud, or they didn't prosecute people, then I would suggest that fraud would increase year on year. So I do think it's good value.
How do we get this out to the community so that they realise that it is fraud is being monitored and people are punished?
We want to, we try and publicise any results. So, for example, the gentleman who was prosecuted, that was reported in the Gazette and Herald, the Northern Echo, the York Evening Press. We also produce press releases on the council's website. We also encourage members, we encourage the public to report fraud as well. And I think in doing so, we are telling them that the council actively investigates fraud.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Chair.
Do we have to have that noted, or does that come along with the Connor's report as well? Yeah, so can we have them both noted by general affirmation? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Move on now to agenda item number 8, which is the external and internal audit and progress report, which is a verbal report update provided by Grant Thornton. If I can hand over to Gareth.
Thank you very much, Chair, and evening to you and other member and officer colleagues. So I will keep this relatively brief, Chair. Obviously, we had the audit plan presented at the last meeting at the end of June. A couple of key things to say since that meeting in June. Myself and my colleague, Greg Charnley, we've met twice with the Chief Executive and with Anton in July and just last week, discussing the progress of LGR, the financial outturn for 21-22, and looking ahead as we now enter sort of the last 6 months of the Rydell District Council's operations before LGR, and just reiterating that importance of maintaining appropriate financial controls in the run up to 31st of March. In addition to that, Greg and I have met twice with Elizabeth as monitoring officer. So alongside sort of discussions around the council's general operations and financial position with Stacey and Anton, conscious from a governance and legal perspective, we wanted to keep close to any developments in that area, and certainly the 2 meetings we've had in July and again last week with Elizabeth have been very helpful to keep us aware of all the latest governance and legal developments impacting on the council. Our team at the moment is preparing for the commencement of the year-end audit, which is due to commence next month, with a view to producing our ISA 260 audit findings report for this committee towards the end of November. That will summarise the key findings from our year-end audit, and we hope to report that back in a couple of months' time. So not a huge amount to go through, Chair, since the last meeting at the end of June, but the bulk of our audit work is just about to commence, Chair. But obviously happy to take any questions on that you or other members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. Are there any questions? No, thank you, Gareth. Thanks for the update, and we look forward to seeing you later in the year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
If we can just have the update noted, if that's okay. Moving on to agenda item 9, which is the review of the council procedures for waste collection for holiday lets on pages 37 to 54, and I'll hand over to Becky. Good evening, Becky.
Good evening, everybody. Yes, so the purpose of this report is to provide the committee with details of a review that's undertaken following the meeting in June, looking at the council's procedures for waste collection from holiday lets. It's really important that the council has procedures in place to ensure that correct waste collection arrangements are in place, which ensures that we're compliant with legislation, and to ensure the council's recharging for the service or does not provide a service where no contract is in place. I'm conscious it's a report that contains a lot of information, so I'll pick out the key points, and of course happy to answer any questions elected members may have. And the review has involved liaison across a number of internal services due to the cross-cutting nature of property records held by the different services. And in Appendix 1, there's some definitions just to clarify the criteria that different services are working for to determine the status of properties. Waste Services relies on information from revenues to ensure that waste collection arrangements are correct. And 3 separate communications are issued to business owners explaining their responsibilities for waste and to promote the council's commercial waste service prior to the removal of any equipment. Prior to COVID, an annual exercise was completed by Waste Services to contact holiday lets who were on the business rates list who did not have a contract with the council. And during COVID, this exercise wasn't undertaken just due to lack of capacity and increased workloads across all teams, managing the additional tasks required due to the impacts of the pandemic. One of the impacts during COVID has been a significant increase, 37% increase in Airbnbs and holiday lets across the district. The review exercise that we undertook in June worked from a baseline from the business rates list, and there were 553 holiday lets on the list, and we sent letters out to 364 property owners. And if I could just take you to table 2 on page 44, which is where the summary of the work to date is provided. This gives you information to the 1st of September. One of the findings from the review was there were 66 properties that actually did have a contract with the council for commercial waste. And the reason for the variance we found was due to the way that properties are referenced between the different systems. So as at the 1st of July, we have put in place another 162 contracts, which represents additional income in this financial year of £26,000. And if that continues into future years, that the value is £39,000 for a full year. 74 properties are either using another service provider or are self-disposing. 36 properties have had the service stopped and equipment removed, and 26 properties have changed back to domestic from being business rated. A number of improvements have been implemented during the review just to ensure we're maximising the use of our technology, and we now are undertaking monthly reconciliations rather than an annual review. And one of the recommendations is to report this as a key performance indicator for the service going forward. This year, the commercial waste service is currently performing above budget with income. That is split into 2 parts. We forecast there will be a significant reduction in contracts because of COVID. Businesses ceasing to operate. Well, that actually hasn't been the case. So we're £55,000 up to the budget at the end of August. And as I said, this exercise has generated income this year of £26,000. We do operate in a competitive market. I have actually brought a price list this evening if members would like to see it. And one of the things that has come out of the LGR work is that Rydell is actually the only authority that operates a banded pricing regime for commercial waste contracts. to enable us to promote the holiday lets as a sort of distinct group of properties, a recommendation is that we introduce a flat rate charge, which brings us into line with other authorities and enables us to promote this service, which is less likely to be attractive to competitors because of the rural nature of where these properties actually are. If the recommendations in the report are supported this evening, they will be referred on to Policy and Resources in November. I think I maybe skipped through the point around the enforcement activity for this service. This year we did secure an additional budget for this year only for enforcement work. This is a very specialist activity, and we do have an enforcement team in the council, but there's no capacity in that team to actually undertake this work. So it is recommended that because of the additional income that the service is expected to generate above the budget, that we utilise some of this budget into future years so this post can be made permanent. So we invest in this resource to enable us to undertake audit and inspection as an ongoing activity for the service. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Becky. I have got a couple, but I'll just ask one for now. Go into the proving the holiday lets are actually holiday lets, and I'm aware it's so many days a year. How I've looked at the information, like how do they prove it's let out? It's like, so if it was an Airbnb, how do they prove that they're letting that out for so many days? It seems to be they'd have to give quite a lot of, I don't know, because Airbnb is all done online and you don't really get receipts. So I just wondered how that does get proven.
I'll pass to Marcus on that one from revenues.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Just on that point, it is quite difficult to prove that. Obviously, as you say, Airbnbs are advertised quite regularly on social media, on the internet. So from our perspective, we would be trying to look at that, to use that as information to try and demonstrate that it meets the qualifying criteria of being let for the number of days that it should be. Thank you.
Obviously, with other types of letting, like with holiday sites or places like that, it's more regulated and they have to let them out for so many days. So it's more the Airbnb thing that I think, yeah, I think it will be an issue trying to prove it. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Councillor King.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this one. 26k doesn't sound a lot of money. Could I ask what the difference is between domestic and business rates collection?
I could just answer that one. Thank you. Yeah. So domestic is for domestic dwellings, so for properties that pay council tax. And then obviously business rated are those that fall into the non-domestic list. So they tend to be businesses. So you've got your domestic dwellings, and then as council tax, you have your business rated that come under the business rate list.
Okay. And are these 6, 9, 12-month contracts? Or is it a 12-month contract?
It varies depending on the nature of the business. We offer seasonal contracts. It really is based on what the business requirements actually are. So most of them actually are for a full year because of the nature of the waste that's generated. They're typically like a domestic property, even though they're running as a business. So we offer the service that we offer our domestic household. So 1 week residual refuse is collected, the next week it's recycling. But if the holiday let requires more of a service, we have a contract which we negotiate, and then the price reflects that contract. So there's a lot of variables in the pricing and the duration of the contract, but that is part of the service.
Whether there's a bit of a big stick here, because you stated that some of your competitors wouldn't go anywhere near it because of the geography. So again, going back to a previous statement I made, are we making money on this? Because you're going out of your, what I'm saying is you're going out of your way geographically, say, or very difficult to access these places. Are we making money, or is it just a big stick thing?
We are generating a revenue from this because we are going anyway. The part of our domestic collection rounds, whereas for commercial contracts, we have separate rounds for purely commercial waste, which are businesses like hotels or, you know, that's an obvious business, whereas holiday lets are part of domestic rounds primarily. So we're passing them anyway. So we will be servicing them if they're paying council tax, or also service them if they've got a contract with us. And the sort of average value of a contract is in the region of £200 a year, £200–300 a year.
I think Councillor King, if I could just come in there, because we had quite a lengthy discussion on this at the last meeting. I think the issue is that is savings, because the same people were getting the waste collected previously and weren't paying anything because they weren't paying council tax. So that was what the gap that we've tried to cover. Becky's tried to cover in doing this. So it is a saving because it wasn't getting paid for before.
Okay. I hope I wasn't appearing too negative there, Becky, but I was just saying it. Well, I saw it in my way, so thank you very much.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Becky, for your report. I think really it's a big plus the way it's moved forward and quite quickly. And really, I think we also should pay gratitude to Councillor Thackeray for banging on his drum about this, because clearly there was a big issue here for whatever reason. So my concerns are the usual things in terms of national legalities, if you like, and the loophole's not going to be closed until whenever it is in 2023. And we're having to wait for things like that, 1st of April 23. I'm pleased you mentioned the equalising out the banding structure, because obviously just £15 difference, but you're kind of saying Helmsley is going to have to pay more than, say, you know, somebody more local to Malton, etc., etc. So I think it's good to even out the cost, because I couldn't understand the principles behind that for whatever reasons they're in place. And it only seems fair and just that you can do that. I was a little concerned when I first read the fact that, you know, 66 properties were already identified, and you know, you realize they were doing something else. But then when you've mentioned it tonight more clearly, that you've kind of got a definitive number, because I thought, well, there's nearly 300 properties that aren't covered, but now clearly they are. But obviously, I'm just hoping we've got real faith in the in-cab system and the information, because it seems to have been a syncing up, as you mentioned earlier in the report, a syncing up between the revenues and what was actually going on. So if that's been tightened up, then we are onto a winner, I think. Enforcement was one of my questions, actually, because I think, well, if we've got structures in place that are now much more black and white and clearly transparent to the public, then if we're not putting it in, enforcing it, then we aren't making maybe the revenues that we should be. And I'm just wondering, I know the table towards the back there does highlight the structure, and it's quite clearly defined, but I'm just wondering, what is the ultimate penalty going to be if we do have somebody, you know, that's erroneous to this and still try to get their waste collected on the side?
Well, we would follow a prosecution and build a case, and if there was sufficient evidence, then we would, you know, take action. It's having the capacity to be able to do that and follow it up, because very much up to press, it's been very much a desktop exercise. Obviously, we write to people a number of times, so to actually have that resource actively on the ground, it just gives us that ability to undertake that. And because of the good work that's already going on in other enforcement activity that we have within our community team, this is another area where we can tighten up.
Yeah, I just have concerns a little bit over, as Councillor King mentioned, you know, what are the lengths of the contracts? Are we making more work for ourselves by having different levels of contract length, rather than just a holistic one for the whole year? irrespective of what you're doing, if it's going to be this amount, is it going to be easier to maintain and police in that respect?
I mean, I have to say, I do think with the majority of the holiday lets, I don't have the information to hand, but I think it's fair to say that most of these properties have a all year round service. But on our commercial waste contracts, we do have seasonal contracts. So caravan sites, for example, don't operate all year. So they have a shorter contract. Schools, the same. So it depends on the type of business. But I think with holiday lets, it does tend to be. I'm not aware that we've got many on a reduced contract, but that's something that I could provide you with if you're interested in the numbers.
The other side of it, as well as your colleague was mentioning there about identifying, how many days something's occupied for. I mean, on the other side of it, they have to declare that because obviously there's rate to relief and things like that incurrent with that. So, in a sense, it's going down the fraud route. So I don't know whether you want to make a comment on that.
No, I think as Becky says there that the enforcement is an important aspect of this, and if it was identified or we had that there were fraudulent activity, then certainly we would be looking to take the next steps in that, and it follows the previous item in terms of fraud awareness within the revenues team, that they are regularly trained in this area to potentially identify and report these situations if they occur.
I think it's a massive step forward. So, thank you very much.
Any other questions? No, I'd like to say thank you as well, Becky. We've talked about it before, but I think the work that's been done in such a small time since Councillor Thackeray brought it up, I think has been brilliant, and you should give yourselves a pat on the back. And let's hope the revenue increases continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So it is recommended that number 1, the contents of the report are noted. Number 2, the profile of commercial waste contracts specific to holiday lets is included as a WES performance indicator to enable performance to be tracked throughout the financial year. Number 3, a flat rate is charged to holiday lets from 23 to 24 to simplify the price for the standard domestic waste collection service, raise awareness and improve the promotion of the council's commercial waste collection service to holiday let owners. Number 4, income targets are increased by 94,000 to reflect the expectation that additional income in 22-23 for the commercial waste service, including holiday lets, will be generated on an ongoing basis, of which 40k is to be utilised to fund a permanent enforcement officer post. And number 5, recommendations 2, 3 and 4 are referred to the Policy and Resources Committee on the 10th of November 2022 if approved. Can we take that by general affirmation? Thank you.
Thanks, Jess.
Moving on now to agenda item number 10, and it's the report of everyone active on the 21-22 delivery of the leisure contract for Rydell District Council. And I think, am I handing over to John? Is it John? No?
John's on holiday.
Oh, right, okay.
But Martin.
Martin, sorry about that. Thank you.
No problem, Chair. I was going to explain that at the start. So, yeah, John Bird is the colleague on the ground in Rydell. He's in Tenerife. This meeting had been moved a couple of times, and we felt we should turn up today. So I'm here on behalf of John. I'm John's line manager. I've got a good understanding of the contract, but if there's anything specific that I can't answer, we'll feed back through Amy as the officer to you, if that's okay, Chair. You've obviously got the reports. I've done 3 or 4 slides to highlight, I think, the key areas of the report. Obviously, if there's any further questions at the end, happy to answer. I would say that this report for 21-22 is on the background of COVID. We only partially reopened leisure facilities back in April 21, but under restrictions. The government let us come out of COVID and step 4 in July, so social restrictions were removed, but then we went into Plan B again with introductions of face masks back over the winter. So it was a topsy-turvy year regarding access to leisure facilities, and we were trying to rebuild on a periods of significant closure in 1920. So I'll start on the first page, health and wellbeing. During 21-22, we've developed a health and wellbeing strategy. This has been delivered off the back of Sport England's Uniting the Movement strategy, which is a new 10-year plan about how we can get the nation more active. And we've developed that strategy for Rydell. The strategy is very much about a targeted approach to populations and population groups. And obviously 21-22 is a recovery year, that the numbers are quite low, as you would expect during that year. Got 6 key themes we're looking at to support the residents of the district. Children and young people, looking at healthy lives, looking at healthy communities, healthy workplaces, healthy ageing, and then active environments. So we picked a few key themes here to talk through with you this afternoon. Exercise referral has been a key delivery driver for us across the district since we started this contract in 2014. That was relaunched following COVID last year. It's a 12-week scheme, and we're looking to assist people's health conditions such as depression, anxiety, diabetes, arthritis, from referrals from health professionals and doctors. We've just recently introduced during 21-22 an app, which is an NHS-approved EXI app, to assist that process with personalised programs for individuals. Last year we had 23 people on the scheme across the facilities in Rydell, and clearly we're building that forward this year as well. The second thing that I'd like to probably highlight is the Rydell Sports Awards was reintroduced last year back in February at the Forest and Vale Hotel in Pickering. I think we're particularly proud of that event that we operate. It isn't something in our contractual arrangements with you. We do it because we think it's the right thing to do. And it highlights sports from across the whole of the district, not just the sports clubs that we're associated with. A particularly successful event with over 100 people attending, and particularly proud that highlights the sporting achievements of the local people of the district. That's to be now continued February 23, currently underway the planning, and nominations will be out there shortly. Moving on, I've got Parkinson's and refugee memberships. We're trying to explore the opportunity to give particular targeted groups access, or free access, for 12 months to the leisure activities we've got at Derwent and Rydell, Paul. We've teamed up nationally with Parkinson's. We know that by increasing people's activity levels for people with Parkinson's, that can assist with the condition that they've got. So we've been offering free memberships to people with Parkinson's. In addition, on the same thing, we've been offering free memberships for people who have got refugee status, and particularly we started with Ukrainian refugees as well. And again, trying to increase activity levels, but also trying to integrate people into their local communities as well. And then finally, again, another targeted approach. We're offering free activity and memberships to looked after children and care leavers, foster families, and young carers as well. Again, trying to work with local groups so we can get those access to the facility. We know that physical activity improves people's mental well-being, but we also know that activity within leisure centres is a social activity and connects people with their local communities. So that gives you a flavour of the type of work that we're doing in 21-22. So it's targeted, it's low numbers initially, and it involves us working with different organisations, partnering and co-designing what we're delivering. Chairs, any questions on that section, or would you like me to wait to the end? Any questions?
Yes, Councillor King.
I just have one. Thank you for that. The Ukrainian, I work with a Ukrainian group. What procedures do they go through for attending a swimming pool? Contact yourselves directly, or what moves have you made? Who have you approached?
They contact us directly. My understanding is we've been working with the local authority now, whether that's you here in Rydell, to signpost people.
North Yorkshire.
Probably North Yorkshire. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Wass.
Cheers. Thank you very much for your report. Couple of questions.
Sorry, Councillor Wass, I think that it was just on this part, the questions. I don't think you finished the actual report, have you?
Oh, sorry. Carry on then. I'll ask you afterwards then.
Okay. Yes, sorry, that was just the health and wellbeing bit. But the next slide was net zero. And I just wanted to take, again, take you through the work that we'll be doing over 21-22. Clearly, the council has declared a climate emergency. We need to be working to net zero by 2050. We as an organisation have developed a net zero strategy to make sure we can do two things, I suppose. Firstly, our support hub in Leicestershire achieve net zero status by 2025, but secondly, work with local authority partners so we can assist with the strategy towards net zero. Specifically, individually at sites, we've got energy reduction plans to make sure that we use as little as gas, electricity, and to some degree water as possible. Those schemes have a look at LED lighting. They look at the management of the facilities using AMR meters on gas, electricity, so we can track half an hour at every site how much we're using. We've got a reduce, reuse and recycle policy as well. So again, we're trying to use as little as possible as we can, and we're working with Rydell District Council certainly on improving our recycling, which has been very helpful for. In addition, we're being audited by an ISO 14001 environmental management, which looks at our systems and procedures to reduce waste, to buy sustainably, and also to achieve a net zero carbon reduction strategy. And I suppose finally, in this year, we're looking at capital projects about what we can do to reduce further our carbon footprint, particularly looking at schemes around solar, which seems to be economically viable at this moment in time. So it's just that these projects will be long term. We'll be working with partners in North Yorkshire Unitary Authority moving forward, but leisure centres, unfortunately, are high carbon in the nature. They use gas mainly to produce, obviously, the heat, but technology is moving fast, and I suppose we want to be at the forefront with options and solutions to reduce our carbon footprint. Any questions specifically on net zero strategy?
Councillor King.
Can you just refresh me, please? Your contract with RDC is for how long?
It ends on the 31st of March 2025. It's got about 2.5 years.
Okay, fine. To achieve this zero rating, will you be looking for funding from RDC, or can you get that elsewhere?
I think it pays back by the end of 2025. That's something that we will invest in, and we have been invested in LED lighting, for example, which is a quick and easy way to reduce your energy. The assets, obviously, the buildings are Rydell District Councils, and therefore, if we're looking at capital schemes to put solar on roofs, which won't pay back anyway, we'd be looking to work with RDC or the new local authority. There is the public sector decarbonisation scheme out there, which obviously we would like to work with councils on putting bids in, and we've done that successfully in other local authorities as well. It's a partnership approach, isn't it? It's not going to be solved by us individually, but there is funding out there to be able to make some difference.
Any more questions on this part? No, thank you.
Last slide was on attendance figures, and 21-22 was a period of recovery. You can see April, I'm not sure the exact page in the document, but I've got them on the slides here. Previous year, April 20 to March 21, we only had 42,000 visits across the 3 facilities in the district of Rydell, purely because they were closed for over 6 months of that year, very turbulent year. We recovered to 155,000 last year, which I was particularly pleased about. I'm particularly pleased with the recovery at Rydell Swim and Fitness Centre and Derwent Swim and Fitness Centre. I think for the purposes of this presentation here, I wanted to concentrate on Rydell Sports Centre. Only had 3,000 visits last year. And I think we've found that particularly challenging last year, getting activity back into the facility. A number of reasons, I suppose, for the low figure. Firstly, we were clearly trying to reduce costs during that period of time. and therefore the facility was not open fully during school holidays, for example, therefore reducing the number of visits we had. Indoor sports clubs were slow to return following the pandemic, and often the last activity were group activities, indoor activities that were able to return as well. And we also know nationally from Moving Communities, which is a Sport England run facility where everyone puts in data on a monthly basis, that indoor sports was being the slowest to return and recover following the pandemic. Pleased to announce that figures have increased substantially this year. I think we're unlikely to return to the 24,000 visits from 1920 this year, but we were certainly building back up already. And we will continue to work very hard, and happy to report back, you know, in 6 months' time, if you wish, on the recovery levels so far.
Yes, yeah, we would like to report back. Is there any other further questions on that part? I think, I don't know if my question comes under that or not, but I'll ask it anyway. Whilst obviously I appreciate it's brilliant to get people healthy and to offer refugees access and everything, we do need to make money. So what are we doing to increase paying visitors as such?
It's a good question. Lots. So I suppose if you want to talk commercially, we have a very strong strategy for driving fitness memberships, and where you'll pay a monthly fee on a direct debit. We have a sales teams making calls. We have a full social media campaign, email campaign. We have daily targets for the staff at site, which I get on a daily basis, and there's a daily and a weekly review of those targets. Yeah, absolutely, driving revenue is key. Part of that is pricing as well, to make sure that we're charging the right pricing. We will be speaking to officers shortly about a price increase for fitness memberships, so we can drive those. We've had those at a lower price to make sure we've got people back. We now need to increase the yield share on those so we can generate more revenue. And talking bluntly, clearly we need to be back to the financial arrangements that we've got with Rydell District Council from April next year.
Thank you. Is there any other questions following that? Councillor King.
Yeah. Is it true to say that you're looking for doctor referrals rather than the average healthy-ish person coming to attend?
No, I think the exercise referral is part of that targeted scheme whereby there'll be low numbers, but the benefit for that individual will be great. The vast majority of people are there for a number of different reasons, and they just join normally through to the website or visiting the centre. But I thought it was a key theme we should highlight, that there's I suppose two strands here. There's the general population attending. Part of that's commercial to make sure our arrangements with you fit, but there's also I think a duty for us to work with particular groups and populations to provide activity for them, because we know that will particularly benefit them. So it's two things, but they are low level numbers compared to the general population coming in. I don't think it compares unfavourably. I would say that each local authority has got an absolute wide mix of facilities. So some local authorities have a large number of facilities. If you look at Redcar and Cleveland, they've got 5 facilities spread out the whole of their district, and you'd argue they're a bigger authority. You've got other authorities that have got very limited facilities. The district of Melton, where I've worked before, has just got one leisure facility in a very large district. So it is very difficult. Rydell, we know the facility in Norton, Derwent Swim and Fitness Centre, particularly small, very, very small gym, 4-lane pool, very difficult to get big numbers through. But then you've got Malton Community Sports up the road, which complements that nicely, but then we don't manage that facility. You've obviously got the pool in Helmsley as well that does well during the summer months as well, which again we don't manage. So we've got a mix in Rydell, but I think it probably does cover most things of what people need.
I've been very impressed with the way that you've come back, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Councillor Wass.
Yeah, I know there's an issue to do with numbers at Rydell Leisure Centre, but people in the local community are quite perplexed by the fact that it's quite a young staff, maybe slightly inexperienced. But you know, people are turning up on a morning for boot camps to find that it's closed and there's nobody there at 6 o'clock in the morning. Activities in the evening have been cancelled. The facilities are not very well kept in terms of tidiness and cleanliness. And this has a knock-on effect. You look at the issues to do with your figures in here, to do with accidents, and across the board they are quite small. But if you look at the number of accidents at Rydell Leisure, and I know sport, you know, lends itself to accidents. I've been heavily involved in sport all my life. But there might be a correlation between that and the lower numbers of people actually running those facilities. And if there is an accident, then you're going to stretch your small workforce anyway. So, you know, compounding all that together, it's not a very good image for that centre, you know, to sort of publicise it to the public.
I would say workforce, if I take that point first, absolutely, recruitment is not particularly difficult. Generally, within leisure, we can recruit people from a younger age group. I think that's a great career from them. I started as a lifeguard, so I think that running apprenticeship programs as well offers people. I'm unclear on the specific points you've raised about about closures at short notice or turning up and staff not there, but I'll take that point away and feed back to you. Regarding the facility itself, I will visit the facility again to see if cleanliness is an issue. Maintenance arrangements are obviously sat with the school, so I think we need to have a conversation with the school on any particular points that you've raised on maintenance. But I would say we have a very good relationship with Stuart Clary at the school, and I'll be surprised if there's any serious maintenance issues we haven't resolved. But again, I'll happy to go and visit and feedback. Regarding accidents, the nature of the activities are particularly different up there. Contact sports. We've got two facilities with fitness. There's no contact sport and very few accidents within a gym area. Again, within a pool, very few accidents. Clearly, slips and trips in a pool area could be an issue. But I do think we're not comparing like with like. But I'll be happy, councillor, to look at similar facilities we've got and compare those. We run a dual use facility in Pindar in the borough of Scarborough, and we could have a look at those as well to compare. So I don't believe there's currently an issue, but I will go back and have a look at it for you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, it's not really, you know, comparing with anything. I just want that facility to run well for the people that deserve it and want it. And if that gets around the community and people talk, you know, you're on to a losing streak straight away.
I agree. I'll have a look at that and feedback. I'll do what the same as you. Yeah.
I think I'll come in there as well. That's all very well because I've heard complaints about various the facilities, but if nobody actually complains, it's hard for the facilities to address them, which I think has been some of the problem, that people talk about it, but they don't actually make the complaint. Yeah, Councillor
come
Ross.
back in there. Just there is a table, and I was just wondering, it's on the report page 79 to do with customer feedback rankings. Could you just explain what that table's telling us? Because I'm a bit bamboozled by what the ratings mean across the top.
I'll have to refer to John Bird, who did the report. Is that okay, councillor? Sorry.
Yeah, it's just not
haven't
clear, you know, what it's a table, but
I'm guessing it's 1 to 10, but other than that, there should be a clear indication of what we're measuring and why.
yeah, which end is which? That's the issue as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And another question, just it's a little bit bizarre this, but it mentions online swimming lessons somewhere, and I was just wondering how on earth those go about.
That was Safes and Payroll. If that was the case, I think we're referring to being able to join swimming lessons online.
I think I'd like to see you trying to do an online swimming lesson, Councillor Ross.
Can I just say on page 76, the totals need to be reviewed. 7.12, just a note.
That's no to review those.
Thank you. Have you come to the end of the report now?
Sorry, yes. Any further questions?
Are there any further questions? No, thank you for your time. Thanks for the report. If you could feed back to us about the other issue in well, we're not even, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone.
So it's recommended that the committee members note the report and the Everyone Active 21-22 annual report. We take that by general affirmation. Yeah, thank you. That's
Thanks, Chair.
noted. Thanks. Moving on to agenda item number 11, which is the Health and Safety Annual Review 21 to 22, which are contained on pages 93 to 118. I'm not sure who's doing this report. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Richard.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chair. So what I've got for you, first of all, is the review of the work that we've done around health and safety over the last 12 months up until the start of April this year. I won't go into everything in too much detail, but there are some things I'd like to just sort of pull out. So the first one is around sickness levels. We have seen an increase in sickness as the year progressed, certainly to sort of quarters 3 and 4. The obvious reason for that is that we've, in the colder months, sort of from September last year, October last year, moving through to March, we did see sort of the spikes in COVID. So that's why we've seen an increase in sickness levels throughout the year. And the one thing that I would like to sort of point out on this is, despite those increases, we have also seen that that's much lower than other public sector organisations as well. So sickness, while it's increased, is actually still performing relatively well for Rydell. So that's the first thing that I wanted to highlight. The second one is around sort of the health and safety management systems. We have reviewed the health and safety policy as of the end of the last financial year. The changes that were made were purely structural and have sort of allowed for easier identification over the responsibilities for health and safety. And this was due to sort of staff members leaving. But also we've brought myself in to oversee some of the corporate resource services, and that's meant that we've actually got a closer overview of the partnership that we've got with North Yorkshire County Council and the management of the agreement that we've got with them. So that's sort of one of the benefits that we've noted within the report. The accident reporting, so table 2 on page 100. Again, we've put a comparison in for the year 2020-21. As you can imagine, again, as we've seen things opening up post-COVID, we've seen number of personal accidents, vehicle accidents, and near misses increase. That's purely as a result of more people being in the office, more people out and about in sort of the roads, sort of busier for the rounds to be operating on. And that's probably what's contributed to the increase in accidents we've seen. Certainly better reporting, because where people are having accidents at home, they don't always report them, even though they should do to us. So that's one of the things that we're working on. Other thing that I'd just like to say on accidents is that we've not had a accident reported under Rydell since 2019-20. So it's sort of 3 years now that we've not had any Rydell accidents reported, which again is really, really good result. So again, shows that the processes and procedures we've got in place are obviously working keeping people protected. There's been a full assessment of the risk assessment that's done. We do this annually, and there's some significant work that we've identified around that, particularly around Rydell House and the transition that we've had to people being able to work more agile. And that's meant we need to look at the provision that we've got in place for fire wardens and first aiders. And we've just completed now the first aider training for the year. And we've got the fire warden training scheduled, the second bout of fire warden training scheduled next week. So that means that we should have a full complement of staff that we need to be able to keep the building safe moving forward. I think that's everything that I wanted to cover really. A few items on training and awareness just to probably share with people around sort of specialist training that we've had for people throughout the year. So IOS training for sort of managing safely. We've had 5 people put through that. We've done asbestos monitoring training, again, people that work in high risk areas, likewise Legionella training. So we've made sure that we've got sort of well-trained staff that are up to date with the latest legislation on these things. But I'm happy to take any questions. Obviously, there's a lot of information in there, and happy to answer where I can.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor King.
Thank you. Page 100, table 2. What is a near miss?
Yeah, so this is the incident where you perceive that a risk has occurred and it might have led to an accident, and it's now when you can learn from it. So it's I would say sort of probably the obvious one would be if we got vans, for example, that are out on the road and they experience something that could cause an accident, and then reporting it back. So that's where we'd sort of near miss. It's usually in a high risk area that you report it, and it's just about sort of developing the organisational learning. It's based. It needs sort of that self-reporting, so people to identify that there was something that could have gone wrong there, and we've got something wrong, or we need to change a policy or procedure. Is the kind of rationale behind it.
If you could just come in, it is best practice in the industry to report near misses, because like Richard said, you do learn from it and you can improve your safe working procedures around that.
Any other questions? Councillor Wass.
I was just thinking of the near miss being while you're writing down the actual event that's just happened. But Richard, on page 99 under 3.3, it mentions there's 57 actions still outstanding, and obviously the overarching heading is COVID-19. Is this historic or is it ongoing?
So in terms of where we are today, that's all historic. They're all actions that have closed down. It was actions that had been introduced when people started working from home, and they'd undertaken sort of DSE assessments, risk assessments on their desks that they were working on and things like that. So it was people could take have chairs taken home and double screens and things like that. It was just about assessing their workspace and making sure they could work safely. So where we are at this moment in time, all of those risk assessments are completed, but they were sort of carryovers from people working at home.
So I wasn't dreaming when you said about, well, my interpretation, I was trying to multitask, which I can't do, but we are legally responsible with people working at home. So what are the guidelines in terms of health and safety when it's not under our direct jurisdiction in terms of what we can see and how the events occur?
Yeah, so it's a great point. It's about the education. The DSE assessment is the best way of doing that, because we can make sure that people have got the chair set effectively, so they've not put pressure on their backs, they've got the screens adequately lit, so they're not straining their eyes. It's all of that kind of stuff. So just make sure that we do that. Certain things that you can't legislate for, if people trip up down the stairs, they could have done that when they're at home rather than at work. But the place that we're responsible for is the equipment that they've got.
Could I just ask, with the accidents, obviously most of them are street scene, does that mean bin men as such with bin wagons? So that's quite a high number of accidents. So what do you do extra for them to try and prevent them?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that have been done. It usually sort of reflects back through toolbox talks, the sessions that sort of Ian and Chris have with the staff, where if we've had those near misses, they'll sit down and talk to people about sort of what's happened and how we can avoid it in future so it doesn't become an accident. A lot of it is just based around sort of that learning from the accidents. We report it back through the corporate health and safety group, and obviously there's a wider group then that have got an opportunity to feed into suggestions or ideas that might actually contribute to improving the health and safety moving forward.
And out of those accidents, do you categorize them into serious accidents, or how much does it cost the council? Does that make sense? If they've been off sick for a long time due to the accident, or if there's been any claims made, do you categorize, or is it just an accident? If you broke your thumb, that's the same as having your leg driven over or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not something that I'm aware of us doing, but we can look into it certainly.
Right.
Again, I can maybe come into that. So for every accident that occurs, we do a management investigation, and we have 2 resources. That we have one health and safety advisor that works for street scene one day a week, and we also have corporate health and safety advisors who work with the team to look at what happened, how could we prevent it. The accident levels are actually really low in a waste service, but they're categorised by type, so slip, trips and falls and so on. So we've got a lot of information behind the accidents, and it's it's something that we employ a compliance officer in the service who works very closely with the management team to make sure that we're following up on all these things. Hence the near miss reporting. That's something that we've improved upon, just stressing the importance of letting us know if something maybe could have happened. I mean, an example of a recent report, I think, was a glass bottle falling from the side of the vehicle when we do the recycling that lifts up and over, and there's some mesh to contain the glass. A glass bottle fell out, didn't hit anybody, but we looked at that to see what we could do. So there's various things, actions we take. We're very proactive in this area just to make sure our safe working procedures are reviewed every time we have an incident.
Thank you. Any other questions, Councillor King?
Yeah, just leading on from what Councillor said, is there anyone still working at home, or are they all back in office?
So yeah, we're working on a hybrid way. So people work in the office and they work at home.
Any further questions? Sorry? Oh, yes. Sorry, I've just noticed that Gareth's still on. Does Gareth still need to be here?
It's up to him, really. I mean,
Oh, right, okay. Sorry, Gareth, I didn't want. I've only just noticed that you're still there. Obviously, if you need to go, that's fine. But I
That's
didn't know
no
if you were
problem,
staying
Chair.
for a
I
reason.
may. I don't think. I mean, the risk assessment one, I may stay for that, and then I may head out after that one, if that's all right, Chair.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Gareth.
Thank you.
Right, so I think we came to the end of agenda item number 11 then. So it's recommended that the committee note the content of the report and the positive progress made on health and safety implementation in the 2021 to 22 year, particular year of considerable challenge given the ongoing impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Can that be taken by general observation? Yeah,
Right, Chair.
noted. Thank Moving on to agenda item number 12, which is the corporate risk register update, and to Richard again.
Thank you, Chair. So with the corporate risk register again, there's been quite a considerable amount of work that's taken place in this over the last sort of few months, really. What I would like to state is that at the point that this was written, there was still some unknowns that obviously have changed since then. So I'll give you an example of this, and that's around COVID-19. When we did the review of the risk register, it was increased from likely major to very likely major. And that was because we didn't really understand what was happening with the vaccine programme for the year and whether the 2021 vaccine programme would be repeated. So obviously there was concern that actually COVID might have a significant increase through the winter months, and not knowing whether there's a vaccine programme in place obviously increased the risk accordingly. So we now know that's in place. I'd just sort of like to caveat what we've written here. Obviously sort of there have been changes that have been taken place. So that's the COVID one really. Health and safety, as we've just discussed. We've got the new dedicated resource in place. Service level agreement with North Yorkshire County Council has been extended for the final year of RDC, and we've been doing a considerable amount of work looking at the action plan and getting the action plan up to date, including the reviews of risks assessments and policy documents. So as a result, the target has changed from changed to likely minor from a likely medium in terms of sort of the risk profile. Staffing resilience and capacity. Risk target's been changed here and is now a very likely medium account on the challenges people are facing and the impact that this could have on the business, particularly around sort of the cost of living, sort of increased fuel costs, rapidly increasing. So, you know, sort of people probably thinking actually looking at alternative employment could have a particular challenge for us here if people are looking at trying to increase salaries. So we certainly felt that the cost of living crisis has a significant impact on the business, and that needed to be reflected within the risk profile. Likewise, financial management. I know that sort of Anton's already been through some of the finances. I think the only thing that we needed to flag here was around sort of political instability and the cause for concern around potential shifts in sort of the political outlook. Again, when we wrote this, we didn't have sort of change in the leadership that we've currently had, and obviously the economic environment that we're now operating in, as Anton alluded to earlier. Information governance remains unchanged. ICT also remains unchanged, and likewise contracts and procurement. The highest risk area that we've got is currently around sort of major events and incidents, and this is largely due to the fact that it's an area of unknown unknowns. So it's a lot of it is dependent on how we respond to that particular event. There has been considerable work undertaken around sort of bronze and silver leads, which Becky has been involved in, and obviously can provide a little bit more information if needed. And we've also done some significant work with the town councils around this. And then we've also increased job creation, economic sustainability and growth from 4C to 4D, so sort of a likely increase. That's now sort of a likely medium on the risk register. And again, this is as a result of the economic crisis the country's facing, and obviously the challenges that that's going to lead to in terms of our employers, particularly small employers, going to be looking to create new jobs to help that economic growth. So again, a little bit of concern around how we can support that. One area that we are particularly good at is around safeguarding. This remains sort of the area that we're best performing in. We've done a lot of work around safeguarding, improving the knowledge across the business from a staff point of view, but also engaging with various different organisations out in the community, such as taxi drivers, Obviously, they play a really important role in terms of identifying where people could be at risk of safeguarding issues. And also, we've got local government reorganisation highlighted as an area of significant risk. One thing to add to this is the recent pulse survey that's been undertaken with RDC staff has put us in a very positive position in terms of the way that people internally are feeling about the changes. And that's obviously something that we want to maintain moving forward. So that's going to be an area that we need to focus on over the next 6 months and retaining that positivity within the workforce. That's a very quick overview of the risk register. Obviously happy to answer any questions as people have them.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, Anton?
Just want to add to that, picking up the financial risk in particular, and I alluded to it earlier, with what we've seen in the last week, whereas we're hearing about potential corrections in the housing market and prices potentially probably coming down. Conversely, we're starting to see huge increases in commercial building costs, and this is happening right across the country. In my role at North Yorkshire, I'm aware of that. Some of the projects that are coming through are increasing by percentages that are way above inflation, and it's a risk. We'll see some of that when we get to council next week in one of the projects we're going to do. And members just need to be aware of the risk. We have ways of managing risk, but it's probably the riskiest that it's been for a few years anyway. So I think it's just worth pointing that out. As Richard says, the risk register is ever changing. I remember coming and talking to this committee about it before and saying it's a live document. It will be different next week. So it's just worth highlighting that and adding to what you said.
Can I just ask? Sorry, Anton, just on the back of that, could you just explain or give us some understanding as to why there's a dichotomy between the domestic market and the commercial market?
I think it's there's probably a number of reasons, and I'm not an expert economist by any means, but the housing market issue is caused by rising interest rates. So we saw that, in decades past, where interest rates get so high that people can't buy. We've already seen mortgage lenders stopping issuing new products in the last couple of days. So that tends to drive housing prices down. The issue for the housing builders is it's because of their costs. So it's the cost of living, the cost of materials, inflation. And again, with our currency going down, any things we buy from overseas goes up already on top of the inflationary problems we've had. So it's two, even though it's property, it's two different kind of ends of the spectrum, really.
Thank you. Is there any further questions? No, thank you. It's recommended that Overview and Scrutiny Committee approve the revised risk register. Thank you for the report. Noted.
Thanks, Chair.
Moving on now to agenda item number 13, which is Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman Annual Review Letter 21/22, and over to Elizabeth.
I'm sorry, Chair. I wasn't prepared.
Sorry, Elizabeth, that's my mistake.
Oh. I'm so relieved to hear that, Chair.
Over to Marcus, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Yes, the purpose of this report is to update members on the contents of the annual letter received from the Local Government Ombudsman for 21/22. And it's recommended that members note the annual letter for 21/22 and the continued good performance of the council. Just to give a brief summary of the report. So the council has reviewed its corporate complaints handling procedures, and as part of that, service improvements have been undertaken with training delivered by the local government ombudsman. 2 training sessions were held and delivered to Rydell District Council staff on effective complaints handling. These sessions were well attended by staff from across the council to embed the new complaints procedure and develop good practice based on the Ombudsman. As a result of the training received and the work that the complaints and insight officers have undertaken with the complaints process, Rydell for the 2nd consecutive year has had no complaints upheld in this 21-22 year. The annual letter for Rydell District Council is attached as Appendix 1, and it shows that from the 1st of April 2021 to the 31st of 2022, no detailed investigations were undertaken following initial inquiries into the 7 complaints that were received by the local government ombudsman. There is a summary in the report that shows the initial inquiries that were made and the local government's final decision. As I say, it's a very brief overview of that report, but I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any, Chair.
Thank you, Marcus. Are there any questions? No, no questions for you on that one. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you.
It is recommended that members, number 1, note the local government and social care ombudsman annual letter for 21 to 22 and the continued good performance of the council. Can we take that by general affirmation again? Thank you.
Chair.
Moving on to agenda item number 14, customer complaints and compliments. Now, I have been informed that this is Marcus, am I right? Yep.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Over to Marcus.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so the purpose of this report is to provide an update on the customer complaints and compliments received in 22-23 to the end of the Q1 reporting period, which ended on the 30th of June 2022. And it's recommended and note and endorse the performance of the complaints and compliments received for Q1. Again, I'll just pull out some of the key areas of the report. So the report provides an overview of the corporate complaints and compliments received in Q1. In Q1, the council received and responded to 19 complaints. This is an increase of 8 complaints from the last quarter, which was Q4 of the 21-22 year. In Q1, 14 of the 19 complaints received were dealt with under the Stage 1 procedure, so that equates to 74% of all Q1 complaints. 5 complainants remained dissatisfied with their Stage 1 response, and they subsequently progressed to Stage 2 of the complaint procedure. In total, 5 Stage 2 complaints were submitted in Q1. 4 were handled within the agreed timescale, and 1 is still ongoing. Of the Stage 2 complaints, one of the Stage 2 complaints has been escalated to the local government ombudsman, and a detailed analysis of the breakdown of complaints, the topics, timescales can be found within the report. Training from the local government ombudsman has taken place. It's taken place in Q2 for all service complaint responders to receive the best practice and guidance and training from the ombudsman. A staff handbook is currently being created by the customer service complaints and insight officers following this training to ensure that services have clear instructions and guidance which is available when answering these complaints. It's his hope that this will improve the quality of the responses to the complainants. When analysing customer complaints, it's important that this is done in conjunction with the compliments received to provide a full picture of the customer's feedback. The number of service compliments recorded in Q1 from the 1st of April to the 30th of June was 20. Of the compliments, 6 received for the customer service teams, including 1 for joint working with the street scene team, and 5 were for the economic development team. Again, a detailed analysis of the breakdown of the compliments can be found within your report. Again, it is a summary of the report, and I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Marcus. Are there any questions? I do have one. It's a strange one, I suppose. I was just intrigued to how somebody could complain about having a stray dog fine. I just didn't know what that would entail. On page 183.
Sorry, so I'll just.
So was that somebody complaining that there was a stray dog and nothing was done about it, or was it a complaint because they'd been fined for not looking after the dog?
It was a bit of an interesting complaint, was that one, Chair. It revolved around a report of a stray dog that actually wasn't a stray dog. So it was quite complex. So
okay,
yeah.
I was just
Yeah.
I found it a bit intriguing,
Yeah,
so I was
okay.
just wanted to ask. Thank
Okay.
you. The second point was, I might be wrong because I don't know the Halmsley area well at all. On the compliments, there's some compliments on the motor home parking. Is that what's now been stopped, the overnight parking? Right, okay, thank you. Any further questions? I was thinking that we've got quite a lot of compliments on it, but it's now been stopped because obviously it was going down too well. Right, it's recommended that overview and scrutiny note and endorse the performance of complaints and compliments received in Q1 of 22 to 23 of the reporting cycle. That can be noted. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Moving on to agenda item 15, which is decisions from other committees, and it is the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 25th of August. Is that correct, Elizabeth?
It's the Policy and Resources Committee, Chair, on the 25th.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so it's just to note.
Okay, so it's just to be noted.
Yes.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the report, the minutes? No. I think some of the things will be addressed in meetings coming up. So
Yes.
I think if we can just agree to have this noted. Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Moving on to item number 16, which is the ONS forward plan. Over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Chair. The major sort of omission now from our forward plan is the work plan for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So in consultation with you and Philip Spur and Stacey Burnett, we discussed the issue about whether we would have the resources in terms of all the other projects that we've got going on, and obviously 6 months left of the existence of the council, as to whether we could, first of all, find the resources to undertake some projects and to look at, you know, different departments, or whether in the circumstances it would just be better to focus on, you know, the work that we know that we have to do, because obviously we have had a reduction in our resources and our workforce across the teams. So it was agreed that we would not put forward a work plan for the last part of the existence of Rydell District Council. So that has been removed. Also, there is an error on here because we've got the standards complaints overview and annual report listed for the October meeting and also for the November meeting. If I could just add that it is for the November meeting, and then all the other items in the forward plan are just sort of standard items that we have, as we're moving forward with the committee. So there's nothing further to report other than those two things. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Were there any questions regarding the forward plan? I did have discussions with Elizabeth and the other officers regarding capacity to put extra things on the work plan, not least for the officers, but for having a reduced number of members on the committee as well. And that was agreed. So I hope that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
We just have to note the forward plan.
Yeah, that's just to be
Okay.
noted, Chair.
Just to be noted. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 17, any other business that's urgent, which there is none. So thank you for your attendance this evening and thank you for all your work. Thank you.